Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and what we are going to be doing today is we are going to be comparing 3 different microcontroller platforms that you can build your projects on. We will be looking at the Arduino microcontroller, we will be looking at the Raspberry Pi Model 2, and we will be looking at the BeagleBone Black. These are the kind of 3 major platforms that you have as far as doing home hobbyist types of projects. And so we want to go in and look at the pros and cons, because I think if you're just getting into this, it can sometimes be confusing. Which direction should you go? Well, to start with, clearly, what you need to start with is you need to start with the Arduino Uno. Okay, the Arduino Uno is the simplest microcontroller to learn. When you're just getting into things, you can pick up an Arduino microcontroller for about 20 bucks. When you get it in, you can have it up and running and write your first program where you do something like blink an LED, and you can have that up and going in about 10 minutes. And so I see that this is a great way to get kids excited about microcontrollers. I've had kids come in that are 7th graders, and I plug the thing in and sort of show them how to do things, and they're sitting there writing programs in about 5 minutes. It is an excellent way to learn programming. The nice thing about learning programming or teaching programming on the Arduino Uno is that when it's controlling other things, when you're making readings from sensors and making motors do things, it's just very, very exciting. So it tends to get kids really excited. First advantage of the Arduino is it is very easy to use. The second advantage is it is very low cost. You can pick up one for 20 bucks, or you can get a really full-featured kit. I like the SparkFun kit. You can get that for about 100 bucks. So it is affordable and it is easy to use. The next thing that's nice about it is there is an incredible array of accessories or sensors that you can plug into this thing. There are sensors for distance, there's sensors for inertial measurement, there's accelerometers, there's gyros, there's magnetometers, there's GPS, there's color sensors. You just cannot imagine all of the different things that you can plug into this. You can plug servos into it, you can plug stepper motors into it, and so you can build really, really complicated and really, really sophisticated projects with this thing. The other thing that I really like about the Arduino Uno is that when you buy these components, the components that you would put in it, the sensors and actuators, are very affordable, but they also come with libraries. The guys at like Adafruit and SparkFun have developed libraries so that it makes it very easy to use those components with the Arduino. You're not having to go in and write registers or do things down at the register level. You just load in a library, and then you give very simple programming commands to make the sensors or actuators do what you want. And so this extensive amount of libraries is one of the things that makes it really good to get the Arduino. Another thing I like about the Arduino is there is a vast array of users. There is an incredibly large user base for the Arduino Uno, and the users are very friendly. So like if you go to the Arduino site and you go onto the forums and you're new and there's something you don't know, they're very friendly if you ask a question. It's kind of like your grandpa sitting there, well, here son, let me show you how to do that. You need to do it, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the users and the user community are very, very friendly. And they're very helpful, and they make it easy that if you get into a project and you get stuck, you can go to the Arduino site and go to some of these forums, and you will usually find help. The other thing about this extremely large user base that's really neat is anything that you're trying to do, chances are there's already someone who has tried to do that or has successfully done it. And so you can find a whole bunch of stuff on the web to help you figure out what you're trying to figure out when you get hung. And so if you want to get started, or you want to get your kids started, absolutely get the Arduino Uno. And I suggest getting the Arduino Uno in the SparkFun Inventor Kit, because that has the documentation and the projects that you need to really get up and learn microcontroller programming. All right, so then with that said, why would you want to do anything other than the Arduino? Why would you ever even want to consider one of these other platforms? Well, this is what happens. The Arduino is so much fun, and you get so good at it, all of a sudden you start in bigger projects. And what finally happens is you will reach the day that you will run out of memory on the Arduino. What I have found is that you have plenty of input and output pins on the Arduino. The microprocessor is plenty fast, but you reach the point that you just don't have enough memory to do your project. For me, that happened when I was working, and this was back in my lessons on toptechboy.com if you were following along. I built the GPS tracker where this was hooked up to the Adafruit Ultimate GPS breakout. I also had an SD card logger, an SD card reader on there, so that as you're around, logs your position. Well, what I wanted to do was I wanted to add a pressure and temperature sensor, so as I walked around, it not just tracked where I was, but it tracked the pressure and temperature where I was. At that point, I could not use the Arduino, because to do the GPS, you had to load the GPS library. To do the SD card to log the data, you had to load a library, and then the pressure sensor had a library, plus the code that you were writing to make everything do what you wanted to do. By the time it added all up, there was not enough memory, and I was simply not able to add any more components to my projects. And so at that point, I was sort of shut down. So you will reach the point one day with the Arduino where you're simply out of horsepower and you'll have to move to a bigger platform. That leaves you kind of two choices. You have the Raspberry Pi and you have the BeagleBone Black. I have the Raspberry Pi up and running for you right here, and I have the BeagleBone Black over here running. And so let me kind of talk about the Raspberry Pi next. And the neat thing about the Raspberry Pi is that it is a full-blown Linux machine. Okay, so you run Linux, and it has pretty much the power of a desktop computer. In fact, you can boot this thing up in a Windows-like environment, and you can load on the Chrome browser, and you can load on a product that's very similar to Microsoft Office, and all of a sudden this thing can work pretty much like a desktop computer, but it costs under 50 bucks, and so I think that that's pretty neat. But as far as doing projects, what can we do as far as project goes? It has a whole lot of GPIO pins, and so you are given access to these pins. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. It has the power like what you would think a desktop computer would have, but it gives you access, hardware access to pins that you can digitally write to, that you can analog write with PWM, that you can read from. And so it kind of combines what you like about the Arduino with what you like about a desktop computer. And so that is really neat. And so I went through a series of lessons where we show you how to get your Raspberry Pi up and running and how you can do various projects on the Raspberry Pi. So my suggestion is that you really start with the Arduino, and then when you reach the point that you just can't go any further with the Arduino, you get the Raspberry Pi. All right. Now, why would you not just do everything on the Raspberry Pi? Then let's just go there and let's forget about the Arduino. Well, first of all, the Arduino is much easier to learn. Okay, the Raspberry Pi, I can get it to do the things that I want, but this interaction with these GPIO pins is not as intuitive and it's not as straightforward as it is with the Arduino. It's completely doable. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, you can get it figured out, and my lessons sort of take you through it, but it's not as intuitive and it's not as nice of a machine to learn on. Okay, this is the other issue with the Raspberry Pi, and it's one that I really, really hope that they will address. Okay, let's go back to the Arduino. What can we do on the Arduino? We can digital write to a pin. That means put it at 5 volts or put it at 0, up or down, on or off. We can do a digital write. We can also simulate an analog write by doing PWM. And if I can get this to focus, let's try it here. Let's see, there it goes. You see that where it says digital PWM and it's got the squiggly, that's saying that the pins that have the squiggly line, you can simulate an analog write by doing PWM. And so I can do a digital write. I can simulate an analog write with PWM. And then also what is really neat is down here in the bottom, you can see that I have 6 analog in pins. So I can read an analog voltage between 0 and 5 volts. So I can digital write, I can simulate analog write, and I can do an analog read. With those 3 functions, you can do just about anything that you could ever want to do. When we get to the Raspberry Pi, on these GPIO pins, I can do a digital write. I can do a PWM write to simulate an analog output, but it does not have anything that will allow me to do analog in. And if you think of the projects that you're going to want to do, I mean, almost all projects you want to do an analog read. You want to read the position of a potentiometer, or you want to read a resistance off of a flex sensor, or you want to read a value off of a temperature sensor where the result is proportional to resistance. And so there's so many things in the embedded project world where you want to do analog reads. The place that you just absolutely hit the roadblock with the Raspberry Pi is that you cannot do analog reads. Now you could get an A to D converter, and then you could use that A to D converter as a chip in your project to read analog values, convert them to digital, maybe come in through the I2C pins, but I don't want to do that, man. It's just like, give me something easy to use. Give me some analog pins on the Raspberry Pi, but that's sort of where it shuts you down. Second thing about the Raspberry Pi is that since it's a Linux machine, you know, like most of the people that use it and most of the forums are Linux guys. And I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the Linux guys are kind of angry. You know, I don't know why. It's not like on the Arduino where it's your grandpa sitting there, here, son, let me show you how to set that pin mode up. You know, we all were new at one point. I remember when I didn't know how to do that. Now I'll show you how to do it. But the Linux guys are angry. I mean, you know, it's just like you go to the forum looking for help, and if you're not like a Linux guru already, they don't have any time for you and they don't want to tolerate you. And so I have found that it's a little bit harder to get help. Also, the user base on the Raspberry Pi is a lot less than the Arduino. There's less people using it, so there's less stuff that's out there. And then finally, the libraries are not written for the Raspberry Pi. There's components that you can hook up to it, but there's not these pre-configured libraries that make using those components easy. And so like on the GPS, if you want to hook a GPS up to the Arduino, there's a library, and then you're just issuing commands that are as simple as gps.position, and it comes back with the position. If you want to hook that same GPS unit up to the Raspberry Pi, you're kind of on your own. I mean, you're out there trying to develop code from scratch. So there's a lot fewer components that are available with pre-configured libraries for the Raspberry Pi. So between the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino, definitely a lot more power in the Raspberry Pi, but the user base is a little more angry, a little less willing to help you, and you know, you're just not going to find the libraries that you're going to find on the Arduino, but it is more powerful. Okay, so then it seems like between the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino, you've pretty much got things covered. So why would we even want to think about the BeagleBone Black? Okay, the BeagleBone Black, what it has going for it is it has about twice as many pins as the Raspberry Pi. That's not such a big deal because I've never used all my pins up on the Raspberry Pi. But what it does come down to on the BeagleBone, which is the reason that you might want to think about it, is it actually has those analog in pins that you need. And so the way I look at it is it sort of has the advantage of the it has the advantage of the Arduino in that you can do digital writes, you can do analog writes, and you can do analog reads, and the Raspberry Pi, which, you know, is a high-power, full-blown Linux machine. You get both of those things in the BeagleBone Black. All right. Well, why don't we just throw away the Arduino and throw away the Raspberry Pi, and let's just all go to the BeagleBone Black. All right. The BeagleBone Black has almost nothing out there. I have not found really hardly any libraries at all on using this. I have found almost no users at all, or forums or help. I mean, it's just almost a desert wasteland. When I started working on the BeagleBone Black, I miss the days that people were being mean to me. The Linux guys were being mean to me as I was trying to ask questions. At least there were people there, right? I guess bad attention is worse than, is better than no attention at all. But there's just very, very little support out there for the BeagleBone Black. And so you're going to kind of be in a lot of these things more or less on your own. I am working on a series of videos that show you how to get the BeagleBone Black up and running, and hopefully that'll be helpful, because I'm kind of more like the Arduino guys. I want to help you. I assume that you don't know anything, and I want to step you through it step by step. What I like about the BeagleBone is I like those analog inputs, and there are some things that I like about it, and so I'll step you through it and sort of show you some of the pros and cons of using this versus the Raspberry Pi. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to take a second and just sort of show you a comparison of the graphical user interface that you can work with on the Raspberry Pi versus the BeagleBone Black. And so I can call those up and we will take a quick look at it. Here's the Raspberry Pi desktop. If you look at it, you can see that it looks a lot like Windows. You would be very comfortable in it. Look how relatively snappy this is. You see we've got our Python interpreters there. We've got different internet stuff we can do, games, accessories, graphics. There's actually a version of a product very similar to Office that you can get that is free, and you end up with a very nice suite of Office tools. You can do spreadsheets, you can do Microsoft Word, you can do something that's very similar to I guess I didn't shut down very good last time. Okay, you can do things that are very similar to PowerPoint. And if you just look at this as I'm clicking around, you can see that this is very responsive. And what I find is it's responsive enough that I could imagine using this as my, as my desktop. I mean, it's just really, it's really pretty good. I don't listen to CNN, but we'll just go there as an easy website to type in. You can see that I'm running Chromium, which is similar to Google Chrome. It's basically the version of Chrome for the machines like the Raspberry Pi. And so you can see that this is really pretty snappy. You can also come here and you can get your terminal window up to do your Linux stuff. And so this is really a very, very nice, very snappy desktop coming off of the Raspberry Pi. And here we've got the Raspberry Pi over here running right to the side, and I'm showing you this live coming off of that. Okay, so let's kind of compare that to, how does that compare to the desktop experience using the BeagleBone? Okay, this is the BeagleBone desktop, and it just isn't as nice. Okay, it's a little bit more laggy. It's a little bit more reminiscent of kind of the first version of Windows, kind of like the Windows 98 type of thing. It's a little bit slow to respond. The fonts and so forth just aren't as nice, and there's kind of a little lag as you're trying to move things around. Let's see, calling up the Chrome browser. To me, it just seems like it's firing up just a whole lot slower. Okay, let's see. Bring up that same website, see what it looks like. Okay, you see, I'm even having to wait. Okay, now I think it'll. Seems like sometimes when I'm typing, there's a little delay. And it looks to me like it's slower getting the web page up and displayed. So kind of comparing these to the user experience as far as if you want to use this as a desktop machine, you kind of want to interact with it from the desktop. Absolutely, definitely, the Raspberry Pi is better. Okay, and then you can also just boom come up in your terminal window, and you can do your Linux stuff. So uh, I mean, this is kind of the way I would see it. You really want to start with the Arduino. You want to learn embedded projects using the Arduino. You'll really love it. You'll enjoy it. It's a great, it's a great way to get started. You'll come to a day when you need more power. When you need more power, you need to go ahead and get your Raspberry Pi 2. On the Raspberry Pi 2, it is a platform that you can learn on, and you can sort of learn your Linux, and you can learn how to do your GPIO control in Python. And so there's a pretty easy path to learning how to interact with your pins on the Raspberry Pi. And then you will reach the day that you need the BeagleBone Black. And what I think is it's easier to learn on the Raspberry Pi, but most of the stuff that you learn on the Raspberry Pi you can apply to the BeagleBone, because once you know your Linux, and once you know your Python, you can always then just go back to your Linux window, and without knowing anything about the BeagleBone, you can find your way around. Plus, these series of lessons that I'm putting together hopefully will be helpful. So, learn on the Arduino, move up to the Raspberry Pi, and once you sort of become familiar with Linux and Python programming on the Raspberry Pi, get a BeagleBone Black. We're not talking about that much money. Each one of these, even the BeagleBone Black and the Raspberry Pi, are well under $50 just for the unit. So there's no reason not to understand this full suite of tools. Just learn them in the right order. Okay, I hope this has been helpful to you. I feel like I've rambled a little bit, but if you liked it, give me a thumbs up. Leave me some feedback. If you got some questions, put your questions in the comment section. Always like to hear back from you. Paul McWhorter, TopTechBoy.com. We will check with you guys later.